Oh, there we go. Oh, wow. Hi. So I'm going to let the rest of my colleagues introduce themselves, but you'll notice that we're one short today, and that's because Richard Freeman, the anthropology librarian at the University of Florida, who was really the catalyst for this in the very beginning. He helped get the proposal together. He passed away tragically a few weeks ago, so just wanted to honor his involvement in this and acknowledge that. So I'm Trey Shelton. I'm the chair of the Acquisitions and Collection Services Department at the University of Florida.
I'm Kim Steinley. I'm the Library Relations and Sales Manager for Duke University Press.
Jason Heckathorn, Library Associate, Projects and Collections Liaison.
Luke Swindler, Collection Management Officer, UNC Chapel Hill.
I'm starting us out. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the model. All right. Oh, should I? I'll hold this and I'll, yeah. Okay. Keeping it casual. So, okay, so the eDuke Book Scholarly Collection. So if you're not familiar, let me tell you a little bit about the model. So we started selling our ebooks in a package in 2008, and we were already selling a journal collection. You might be familiar, eDuke Journals collection, in 2005. So when we started selling the ebook package, we went to what we knew, which was how to sell a journal collection. At that point, we had separate book and journal departments, and the journals department had relationships with libraries and consortia. We had a model. We had a pricing model that was tiered based on Carnegie, and we thought, you know what, let's try to use the same model that we're doing for journals to sell the ebooks. And so that's what we did. I make it sound easy, but we had a lot of discussions about what to do with our ebooks, and you may be familiar with October Ivins. She's a consultant and seems to know everyone in the industry, and she actually helped us come up with the model. So the basic model is just like journals. If you want to subscribe today, you would get perpetual access to content from the current year, and then you would get term access to all of the available back content. At this point, we have about 2,400 books that are digitized. We do about 120 books per year. So something unique about the books collection that's slightly different from the journals is that we have a print add-on component. So we have a lot of, we're humanities, social sciences, if you're not familiar with the press. We do art books, we have lots of great images in our books, and so we realize that sometimes people want to actually see the physical book. And so we wanted to make sure that folks who wanted the print component in addition to getting the E would be able to have an option to do that. And so we have a print add-on option that for a low cost, it's like about $5 a book. You would be able to get the entire front list as an add-on. So it's optional, but you would get all of the print just from that front list year. And we actually have about, I would say 50% of the customers do get the print add-on component. Something else to say about the model that is unique, I think, to us, is that we include all titles that we have rights to. So there are a few titles every year where we just can't secure the rights for one reason or another, but for the most part, we're trying to include all of our books. So we're not removing books that we've identified as course titles. So if you're getting the collection, really you're getting just about everything we publish. And then for the few books that maybe we can't secure the rights for, we're going to let you know that these aren't included. So if you want to go ahead and get them in print, you can. We have tiered pricing, and let's see. We also, so something new, so eDuke Books and the model I just explained started in 2008, but actually last year we started offering subject collections because some folks said, we actually don't want all of your stuff. That's great that you have that option, but we just want something in a particular subject area. So we started experimenting, and we have 2 collections now in Latin American studies and gender studies, and for those 2 collections, you've got a bunch of options you can own. So you can buy the titles upfront, have perpetual access. You can lease, so you can do a calendar year lease if you're interested, term access only. But if you do that lease for 5 years, we're just going to give you perpetual access. So it's like a lease-to-own model, or a way to break up payments, or however you want to think about it. If you lease to own, there's a slight premium, so it is a little bit cheaper to go ahead and purchase right now. If you did a lease to own, you're probably going to pay maybe 7 to 10% more than if you did it made a purchase up front. And what we're thinking about is expanding to other collections, because Latin American studies and gender studies are probably our strongest areas. But we're very interdisciplinary, so we've heard that some folks want smaller collections, so we're looking to do things like religious studies and sound studies to offer some smaller collections as well. And let me tell you about the features, some things that we're really proud of. We don't have any DRM. You can download by chapter, you can download PDF, do what you want with the PDFs. Let's see, I have to look because I should be looking at my paper, but I'm gonna just turn and look because we're keeping it casual. We're going to have a new website, so that's what I actually want to talk about. Is we're going to be moving the ebooks from the Highwire platform to Silverchair, and that's happening actually this month. And we're excited because it means not only are we going to have a better, easier to use platform that is mobilely optimized and more visually appealing and easier to use, but it's going to allow us to do faster product development. So we're going to think about doing things like evidence-based and smaller subject collections. And if we do all of those things, they're still going to have the same rights. So they're still going to have no DRM and have PDFs downloadable, and then also more discoverable with the journals that you already might subscribe to. And I'm going to stop there.
Well, I think I'll begin by saying that making a decision to do a different kind of acquisitions is not made without a context and without a philosophy of change, particularly when we're talking about creating another subscription line, another deal that is funded off the top. So for UNC, the challenge has been, in a world of ever-growing content, along with the ever-growing cost, how do we remain a good library? Well, you remain a good library by becoming a different kind of library. And becoming a different kind of library means you change your collection's philosophy and you change the corresponding collection's strategies. And that's where Duke sort of comes into this with their program. So the big thing we wanted to do was move UNC's print collections of books to an e-environment. We wanted to do as quickly as possible and affordable and acceptable to users. And that acceptability to users always took into account the need, the desire, the fear of print. And so what we did is we, first of all, admitted we were going to take a chance. And my understanding of chance is risk. And risk always has two components. There is danger, but there's also opportunity. And so when you're so committed to changing, when you see these meta goals of shifting the collections from tangible media to 24/7 services, you are willing to do something new. And so we had already centralized collections funding, which gave us the financial wherewithal to move across the disciplinary spectrum. We always tell our subject librarians, other than restricted endowments, you don't own a penny. It's all our money. And we also tell them that we have different expectations of them. I tell them point blank, we're not hiring you to select books. By this I mean, we're going to take care of the core books. They're going to come into the library sort of by a process of collection development osmosis. And so we want you to spend time on problematic acquisitions. We want you to spend time on delivering services. We want you to spend time on outreach and engagement. We want you to start helping us raise endowment funding, all of these other things. So it means we don't want them to spend time on ordinary selection for core materials that we're going to buy anyway. And so we looked at presses where we were buying a very high proportion of the titles anyway. You know, once you get into the 75% level of acquisitions of a publisher's monographic output, well, maybe it's time to invest or investigate investing in the buying everything. And if the financial metrics can work, then you have the inducement as well. And UNC had already successfully switched, say 13 years ago, a STEM publisher, Springer, from print books to ebooks. We had then shifted a social science publisher, Sage, from print books to ebooks as the default. With our program with Oxford University Press and all its 20 university press partners, we had switched to a model where the default is E, but we would have one shared print copy for our local consortium called TRLN, Triangle Research Libraries Network, and those books would be put in an off-site storage facility. And so we said we weren't going to duplicate books in the STEM fields. Then we would say, okay, we're not going to duplicate books in the professional fields on the OUP platform. Then we weren't going to duplicate books in non-STEM fields that acted like STEM fields, such as psychology and economics. Then we weren't going to buy books that were consisted of articles that were separately authored. And then we decided eventually there are some humanities disciplines that are ready to go to ebooks as a default, linguistics and philosophy being the first two. So I think we were at the point where we were ready to take that bounded and calculated risk of moving and buying everything from a university press where we were getting a fair amount of content to begin with. So that sort of sets the stage for why UNC was willing to do what it does, and it will later set the stage for how we evaluate what we've done.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the University of Florida's collection philosophies and acquisition strategies for ebooks. So we have multiple acquisition streams and a mix of centralized and decentralized funding for these ebooks. We obviously have, we don't have quite the same philosophy that Luke does about his selectors. So we have some 50 some odd subject selectors, and they each have their own firm order funds that they use to buy ebooks if they choose, from slips or from however they find them. We also run several use-driven acquisitions plans. So we have a large DDA through Gobi for ProQuest ebook content. And we have several EBAs, evidence-based acquisition methods, evidence-based acquisition plans we've got Elsevier, Taylor and Francis CRC Press, a Cambridge University Press plan that is shared with Florida State and UF, and we have a Taylor and Francis Social Science and Humanities EBA plan that's consortial for the entire state of Florida, all the state university libraries. So we have a lot of things going on, and we really stopped buying ebook packages in about 2012, 2013. And at that same time, actually the next year, we became aware of actually, I'm skipping ahead, I'm gonna stop. I'm getting ahead of myself. So you may be wondering why we're not on the stage and why I was wanting you all to sit up front, and it's because we really want to have a discussion with you all about this model and your thoughts about it, how it impacts you, just as how it impacts us. So the first question is, why did Duke University Press decide to implement this model? If you haven't already covered that.
Right. Yeah. Well, we were experimenting with ebooks, and we had had so much success with selling the journal collection that we thought, let's give this a try. And I think like what Luke said, the first grouping of customers that we were thinking would be interested would be folks that were getting most of our content through their approval plans. So 75% or more getting Duke books already in print through approval plans. Those are the first people that we went to say, hey, this is something you might be interested in. You'd get everything. You could even get the print if you want. So we sort of thought we were playing with product development and trying to look at different revenue streams, hearing what libraries wanted, and we thought this was something that we knew how to do, and we thought, let's just put it out into the market and give it a try.
And we're going to keep coming back to you for questions throughout. So if you have a question, please use the microphone, or we can repeat it if you're not comfortable with the microphone. I don't see any questions for Kim, so at least at this point. So why did UF and UNC Chapel Hill decide to go with this model? For UF, it was that we became aware of the model in 2013-14, and we were already purchasing a lot of their content, and I love the fact that you got the backlist, and I proposed it as a wish list item at the end of the year, and it got picked up through our multidisciplinary fund line, and there we are. And now Luke's going to tell us a little bit more about why they chose.
Well, we actually made two choices. We were part of the pilot, and then we decided that the model didn't work for us. And then the model changed, and it started to work. And so I don't mean to sound crass in terms of money, but money does count. So when we were a part of the pilot, we had been buying all these Duke University Press print books. We bought them as a paperback default. Well, the price of ebooks are at the level closer to the price of hardbacks. And what that would have done is increased our annual acquisitions cost by over 200%. That did not work for us. That was simply too expensive. It had to be, the cost benefits had to be more or less equal. It didn't come necessarily in terms of the dollars, but it comes in terms of what we were able to get. So DUP modified its program. So if you started buying the upfront file of all the books, you got access to several years of back file. So that was a significant financial benefit. And then you could still get print for an add-on of $750. It was almost like nothing. And it assured faculty in the humanities fields where DUP really concentrates its publishing that there would be a print book if they wanted it and if they needed it. But also, we were once again willing to take a chance. And again, looking at the financial metrics, UNC and Duke have an off-site storage facility. It is now the largest library of print volumes in North Carolina, much larger than the main library at UNC and much larger than the main library at Duke. And when you have an off-site storage facility where each module is $10 million and the operational costs are another $250,000, it takes a lot of energy to keep books at 55 degrees in the sunny South. You become acutely aware of space. And also, the library was changing. The library wanted to reposition space in the main library. And, if I told you the main library at UNC was 425,000 square feet, that might not mean a lot, but if I told you it was equivalent to 7 NFL football fields with end zones, you see that we're talking about liberating a lot of space. So we were more willing to take a chance by going with E as our default. We had changed user behavior to where we were confident they were more willing to accept E as the default. And we had successfully converted some humanities areas already. So we thought that the library and the library's users were ready to go to this new model, to pay more than we had been paying because we were going to get more. And this combination of access to the backlist, so long as we continue to buy the ebooks up front, and the ability to have, for a marginal additional expenditure, all the print books, changed the financial equation for us. And so that's why we went back to DUP's program.
So, do we have any librarians here who participate in the E-Duke Scholarly Collection? Would you mind sharing the reasoning behind why you?
I wish I could, but I just started a year ago, so I have no.
Okay, so for the recording and for if you couldn't hear, she just started a year ago. She doesn't know exactly why. She doesn't have the backstory.
NC State.
NC State, okay. Anybody else? So if you don't participate, is there a particular reason why you do not? There doesn't necessarily have to be a reason. There's lots of things we don't participate in, and there's not always a reason.
I'm just going to
Please.
microphone to somebody if they need it.
Oh, great.
I'm from Duke, so I'm not.
Okay.
And please be honest, if it's not a model that you are a fan of, we want to hear that too. So feel free, if you have critiques of the model or you would want something different, please share that.
So we really want this to be an open and honest discussion. So, all right, well, we'll move on. So I was interested in learning how the pricing is determined for these collections, Kim.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so the way that we came up with the pricing initially is we said, okay, how many books a year do we publish about? And it's anywhere between 100 and 120. It's actually more like 115 per year. But what we did is we said, okay, let's take the cloth price, which libraries with journals, it's like the pricing with journals, you've got the individual pricing and then the institutional pricing. And on the book side, cloth and paperback are sort of that way, although we learned in the pilot, as Luke mentioned, that many libraries had already transitioned to getting paperback. But that's how we came up with our pricing, is we said, okay, we're going to promise at least 100 books, and then we're going to use the cloth price to get a list price, and then we're going to tier. We're going to do discounting by tier, and we did that just like the journals with Carnegie, where somebody that was a tier 5, an ARL, would get about a 30% discount off that list that I just mentioned, and then a community college would be getting more like an 80% discount. But yeah, we did. It was really good when in 2008 we had the pilot, and we had about 20 libraries that participated, and we gave them a 50% discount. Participate, give this a try, give us a lot of feedback. And it is true that UNC was a part of the pilot. We got a lot of great feedback, especially about how we had come up with the pricing. But we did stand by that because we thought that there was still going to be value with that pricing. Yes, it was based on cloth, but even if you weren't getting cloth, you're still getting a discount. And if you combine it with the print add-on that is so cheap, that hopefully you're feeling like you would be getting value out of that combined complete cost.
Are most of your customers coming from the high tiers, or is there more action in the low tiers as well?
It's interesting because in the beginning it was mostly high tiers, but we also have a lot of tier 3s like Oberlin colleges, and then we actually have a few tier 1 schools, which is surprising, but I think because we've discounted it so much, the way we think about pricing is, we're nonprofit, so we need to make some money, but we also want people to use the content. So when we think about our tiers 2 and 3, we try to discount as much as we can because we realize that those are folks that probably are not necessarily going to find collections appealing, but if it's the right price point, maybe they would. So yeah, we actually have a mix, which is surprising to me because I would have thought in the beginning it would have just been the top tier schools.
Anybody else? Okay. So The next question is, so how is this model funded at each school? So at UF, I mentioned earlier, it was a wish list request at the end of a fiscal year. We took a little bit of scoop. We used that to purchase the first year, and then we started allocating for that in our e-resources continuation lines so that we have a reasonable increase every year so we can keep up and we're not always trying to find one-time funding for the model. And now Luke's going to tell us about how they do it at UNC.
Well, you know, there's no real difference. Once you decide that you're going to buy all the content or nearly all the content of a publisher, whether you're talking about monographic or e-journal publications, then you are making a long-term commitment. You make a long-term commitment, you put subscription dollars behind it. Whenever UNC has shifted its book allocations for a publisher from print to electronic, we have never gone back. We have made these choices very carefully and selectively, and we have no intention of going back to print only and getting paperback. We see the value of having ebooks. We understand that ebooks are used differently, they meet different kinds of needs, and they meet our major goal of shifting book collections to a 24/7 service.
So do we have anyone in the audience who would like to share how the model is funded at your institution? I know you're new, but
Yeah, it's continuing.
okay, so also a continuation line. Okay. Please. We are not, and actually, this is a little embarrassing. I didn't know about this until Luke told me about it. So I'm sure Duke told me, and I forgot. But but now that we know about it or remembered, I think that's definitely something we would consider. So we have, you may have heard about FLAIR in some other sessions today. I don't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but it's our statewide consortial storage facility, and I think that would be something we might consider just sticking directly into FLAIR for the whole state.
Can I say something
Yeah,
about-
please.
Yeah, so about the print add-on, it's really interesting. So like we have steadily had about 50% of the collection customers getting the print add-on, but those customers are changing. So most of the time, people will start out and say, well, yes, we have to get the print add-on, because really, it's cheap. I mean, it's if you want to get it, we hope that you can add that small cost on. But then, depending on the school, some schools will have it for a few years because we understand there's a cost with it. We're offering this at a really good deal, but we're not offering shelf-ready services. So we understand that there's a resource cost to actually getting this year of books and doing something with it and putting it on your shelves. So some folks have said, well, we tried it for a few years and we don't have the room or whatever. But also that depends. Some smaller schools are the ones actually getting the print add-on as well, which is surprising. And some of the bigger schools have said, we have a mandate, no more print. So we just can't do it. So the mix of who's getting the print add-on, while it's steady, the schools are changing, and it really just depends on what is their strategy at this time, what is their development policy, do they have a place to put the print, do they want to deal with it? Some folks have said, well, in your 120 books a year, maybe you've got 5 art books. We actually just want to buy those and have those in print, and we don't want to deal with the print add-on. So it depends.
That was really great information. Thank you, Kim. So the next question is, how is the model treated? So we talked a little bit, we've already talked that it's treated as a subscription. So at UF, that means that it's, excuse me, handled by our e-resources unit. But I could easily see that it could also be handled by our monographs unit. And I was just curious if there were differences at UNC or at other schools.
Well, it's handled by our monographic unit. Our monographic unit is not called acquisitions, it's called monographic services, which tells you where the library is going. So they handle all of our title by title, monographic acquisitions, all of our approval plan acquisitions, and all of our ebook packages. And so this works out nicely since we have both ebook packages and we have periodic shipments of print monographs. And this works well enough. Will we continue print? I don't know. And this brings us to, the question of evaluation. And because it meets our broad policy goals, because it fits within the context of what we had been buying, and because there have been no complaints, we don't spend a lot of staff time evaluating, is this a good deal? We will save that time for $1 million serials, e-journals, big deal, where we want to get a lot of metrics. And over time, I think at some point we might drop the print, even though it's a very good deal. Our reluctance has to do more with our close relationship with Duke and expectations about having access to scholarship produced by DUP. If we had done this with a library several hundred miles away, we probably would have let go of print by now. So this is how we evaluate. We evaluate it at this meta level, and this is good enough, as opposed to the minute, detailed usage studies, figuring out what is usage, which counter report for books counts, which one doesn't count, do we have to discount it because something is wrong with the stats? It's not worth it.
So now we want to hear, actually, do we have any questions from the audience about any of that? Okay. Do you know who handles, monographs handles it, okay. Interesting. We actually struggle with that, especially with ebook subscription packages, and this is, I call it a hybrid model because you're purchasing and you have term access, which is like a subscription. So we often struggle at UF in the acquisitions and collection services department to say, okay, well, who wants to handle this? And we sort of just go back and forth and make up our minds. And it often depends on the funding line. But so now we want to hear a little bit about how Duke University Press assesses the model themselves, a glimpse behind the curtain, if you will, into their thinking.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think when we first put this out, we wanted to see if people were interested. Do we have customers? Some people, do we have 5 customers? Do we have 100 customers? So I feel like we're happy with the number of customers that we have, and I think that our goal really is to offer libraries a choice. We're not looking necessarily for this model to replace our declining print book sales. It's not going to. What we do hope, though, is that the libraries that want to switch over to e-access, they know that they have a choice, and we encourage folks working with us directly coming to our platform. But we also know that some people have a preferred platform. They want to go to EBSCO, they want to go to ProQuest. So we sell our books individually through the major aggregators. So this is just another option that we offer, and we're looking to offer more options. So we're happy with the group of customers that we have, and really the idea is, if you know about our books and you want them and you have room for them in your programs and a need for them, if we can offer you as many options as possible, whether that be through an aggregation, whether that be directly from us, lease, purchase, that one of those things is going to be appealing. That really is our hope. I mean, like I said, we're looking for sustainability. We're looking for dissemination. If people want access to the books, we want to give it to you. We can't do that for free, but we want to do it in a way that it's affordable, it feels fair, it's sustainable for us both. That's really what we're looking for at the end of the day. We want people to be using the books, and we want to stay afloat, and we want you all to find that our model works for your library specifically.
And Kim, I just realized that we've been talking about libraries and publishers, but there usually is an intermediary, such as a big vendor owned by ProQuest or EBSCO, And what happens with this kind of deal, it is typically between the library and the publisher. And not having the vendor as an intermediary allows the publisher to offer a better deal financially. It means that if the publisher provides MARC records, we don't have to pay for MARC records. And so these things change the net cost in a way that makes the model more attractive to both the publisher and the library. But as with evidence-based models, which typically leave out the vendor, it does change the whole book trade. And if these models proliferate, it will have a significant impact on the intermediaries who deal with the mass of our approval plan books, the mass of our firm order books, the mass of our standing order book acquisitions. So we're kind of aware of this. We don't know what's going to happen, but again, it is this changing world where roles and positions are evolving and where relationships, long-standing relationships, are changing or being eliminated.
So Luke's already touched on this a little bit, but how do we at the libraries evaluate the success of the plan? And I think Luke's right. Looking at usage has its limitations. It's not that we don't do that at UF, but we don't do it regularly. We don't hyper-focus on it. We do have some usage analysis towards the end of the presentation that Jason's going to talk about, but I'll be honest, we did that specifically for this presentation. We have found that the model and the content that is being provided is good enough that we would be buying it anyway, so we're not going to hyper-focus on usage. And do you have anything else to add about how you assess?
No, I think your phrase of good enough is the key thing, and that's what we talk about. We talk about good enough solutions, and that's good enough.
We look at usage too. I mean, certainly we want to make sure that we're looking at cost per use, and we are hopeful that it's not the only thing that libraries are looking at when they decide whether to renew or not. But we can compare it to our journal's usage and see, is this something that folks are getting value from? That's what we want. It helps us figure out if our price points are right, and so we've looked at usage ourselves, and we've actually felt like that we've hit the mark, and that folks are getting value, especially if they were getting print before. Gosh, they're getting a lot more use, and their patrons are discovering the books electronically when maybe they had not even seen the print books.
Please.
Talk a little bit about how we use the cost per use and reclassification tiers.
Yes, so the question is cost per use and reclassification of tiers. Yeah, exactly. So when we think about our tier structure, we're taking certain Carnegie classifications. We're using the basic classification, and we put folks into 5 tiers. And when Carnegie changes, we have to think about changing and slotting people into different tiers. But yeah, when we look at cost per use, and if we see maybe that a particular Carnegie class has not so good looking cost per use, we might think, is it in the wrong tier? Maybe. The other thing that we think about is if somebody comes to us and they say, Kim, we're in a tier 4, but let me tell you about my program, and actually we don't have that much in humanities. We might say, well, okay, let's do a pilot where we put you in a lower tier, and then we'll evaluate. If you come back and you've got 5 cent cost per use, we're like, well, we can't keep you in that lower tier, but but we'll always entertain all of those things, because I would say that the cost per use and even the tiering, it's not a perfect solution. It's basically a structure and a place to start, because we want to be transparent. We really pride ourselves on putting the pricing out publicly. We're willing to negotiate, but what we don't want is that you just have an email address that says contact us, because I think then it makes libraries feel like that we're going to charge you what we think that you can pay. It's like, no, that's not what we want to do. We want to show you the structure. We want to tell you the discount. We want to tell you exactly how we came up with the price. Maybe you don't agree with it, but at least we can be transparent about where we're getting the pricing from, so then we can have a discussion if you're not a fan or it doesn't work for your library.
So do we have any more questions or comments about the how and the why before we move on to the what if and why nots? Okay.
Oh, right. So things that we have to leave out of the collections. There are some times where we distribute titles we have a museum that the Nasher, that we distribute titles for, and we just don't have the rights to those sometimes. Most of the time, what we don't have rights for are really art-heavy books, where either we just can't secure the rights to the images, or it may be that the cost to get the rights is just not something that we can afford or sustain. Pretty much that's what we exclude. For the backlist, we don't have everything digitized. So this is like what we're doing going forward, starting in 2008, looking at the list and trying to get the rights for every book that we possibly can. For the pre-2018 backlist or archive titles, basically we have a collection of titles that we identified as having rights for it, that we digitized, but that is not our full backlist. So I think moving forward, we try really hard every season to get all of the rights for all of the books. And then if we look at the archive, we hope to increase the number of books that we have in the archive, but we would need to secure rights for those books as well as pay for the digitization of those books. Does that help? Okay. No, I would say, we're usually publishing about 115 books a year, and I would say each year it's less than 5 books that are excluded. Yeah.
Do you have partial exclusions?
Yeah, we do have partial exclusions. We do. So if there's 2 images in a book, we're not going to remove the book from the collection. We do have a threshold of between 20 and 30%, and that's chapters. Sometimes we're republishing some content that's within a book, or maybe we have several images. So we look really carefully. If it's just a little bit of the content or the images, we'll keep the book in, and we'll note on our title list that there are some exclusions. But if the percentage of content is over this threshold, or the removal of the images makes the book not so usable, in that particular case, we'd probably just remove the whole book. Yeah.
Images are the real problem, because if DUP had an image-heavy book, they could pay for the copyright IP charges, and they'd have a $1,000 book that no one would buy. And this is recognized. So the Mellon Grant, the Mellon Foundation, as it does with so many other areas of humanities, is experimenting with some of the big art museums, such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, to move to a different kind of pricing for the non-profit sector, which will allow art books as well as books in photography to get into the ebook mainstream in terms of more or less completeness. On the other hand, I do recognize, I have been educated by our art librarian to be sensitive to how art and photography books are used. Often you need to have several physical items accessible in a way that you really can't replicate in an e-environment. So I think, both librarians and publishers are sensitive to what cannot financially be included in ebooks, but there may also be a broader user-related reason, but at the same time, we still may want that fairly complete ebook because people use books differently. Someone may need the print book for their research, but if they forget a footnote or if they need a quick consult, the ebook would be preferable.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. So the next question is, why not others? Why are other publishers not actively using this model? I happen to know that Taylor and Francis will offer it if you ask them, but it's not their model of choice. And my impression is that part of that is because their front list is so large, the dollar value to buy it, most libraries turn their nose up, and I know I would. So has anyone heard of any other publishers or vendors, for that matter, I doubt it, offering this model? And if not, why do we think that they're not, besides just, oh, their front list is too large? If you're a publisher or a vendor, please speak up.
Yay.
Hi, I'm Sylvia from Brill. Yeah. And our front list is about 800 titles per year. And right now, our ebook backlist starts in 2007, effectively, for our subject collections. And so if you could imagine, we probably have 8,000 books in our backlist. It would be hard for us to go to our executive board and say, hey, by the way, we thought we'd sell 800 and give away 8,000. Is that okay? Because our books have a long shelf life. They're about classics, Middle Eastern studies, and Asian studies, et cetera. And so there's some business, we're a commercial publisher as well. So there's some business reasons why we actually keep all that on the list, on our price list. And we can't really financially make a case to give it away, even if we do get a multi-year agreement for the front list, which is valuable to us. It's really hard to give the entire backlist away. And I don't think librarians like a rolling back access. That's not really, nobody likes that. And we don't like it either. It's hard to keep track of. But I think smaller university presses have a lot more flexibility, especially if you're a nonprofit. We have shareholders in Holland, so we have to meet certain standards, financial standards for them as well. And that's at least one reason I can think of. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really
we do
good point.
discount the back years because we understand people have purchased print. So we are willing to work with people to accommodate, but we can't give it away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that's really helpful. Yeah, and I will say that for our model, so we do the term access, but then also we do offer perpetual to the back content, so back years or the archive. And so sometimes folks will get term access and then come to us, maybe they have end of year money and they really do want perpetual access, and they'll say, okay, we're ready to buy the archive. But I know I've tried to sell the archive to Luke and he says, no, I'm actually really happy with the model, continuing to buy the front list and then getting term access to the back list. If he has no intention of stopping getting each front list year as it comes out, then he's always going to have that term access. Sometimes international customers, maybe they don't know that they're going to have the funding every year going forward. So sometimes they really will want the perpetual access. So different options and models. So thank you for sharing that.
Anyone else with thoughts about the why not? Okay, please.
I know you didn't want the too many titles answer, but from a aggregator perspective,
Uh-huh.
you're looking at like 75,000.
Right. So to repeat for the recording, from the aggregator's perspective, with a 75,000 title backlist, you said, front list, excuse me, that you can't make that happen pretty much. And I would be surprised even if you would make it happen, I don't know if anybody would buy it. or have the funding to buy it. So yeah, please.
I'm Melissa with the MIT Press, and we're launching a new ebook platform this coming year in 2018, and kind of similarly to Duke. And I think we've heard a lot of demand for that type of model from some librarians. So that certainly pushed us in that direction. I think we're trying to think of different ways we can be promoting ebooks, and we do hear a lot of librarians saying that we think we get most of your content, or we get some of your ebooks or whatnot, but they're kind of getting them piecemeal from different sources. So we really want to have a direct model where they can just come to MIT Press and get the full list, at least of what we have the rights to, as we were saying.
What's your front list size? every year?
So front list, I think around 175, 200 titles.
So comparable. I mean, in the same
Yeah.
order of magnitude. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So the next question, we're going to dive into what if we had done this as a PDA or a DDA, and then what if we had done it as an EBA? Before I hand the floor over to Jason, I think we should point out that one, Duke was not involved in this analysis, and it's not perfect. It is a snapshot based on a lot of assumptions in order to be able to do the analysis quickly and effectively for this presentation. So I guess we'll just give it to Jason.
Great, thanks, Troy. So we're going to look at this as a DDA, and then we're going to look at this as an EBA, and it's kind of curious with Kim mentioning that they're looking at that as something that might occur in the future and how that might relate. Maybe this will spark some conversation about that. So if UF has started a DDA, you can see right off the bat that this is that the model is far preferable to a DDA. That the spend for a one-user DDA, which is comparable to our large domestic DDA, would have been over $36,000, and had it resembled the method by which we access the books in the eDuke model, being unlimited, that would cost us well over $56,000 just for the titles used in the year 2016.
And the other thing is that we wouldn't have normally put all that content into our DDA to begin with.
Right, that content would not have been discoverable. Yeah, so, right. That's the large caveat there. Are there any? I see some wrinkled eyebrows, maybe, or.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I know when Trey was saying, I have to tell you, you might not be happy about this slide, but honestly, 56,000. I mean, I think it's a good example, but I don't know that a library would pay that for, So I think, if we're thinking, well, are we losing money? I don't think anybody would pay that. So again, it's really like thinking about what are people actually going to be willing to pay for this? What is reasonable and fair? And how can we get folks access to all of the content? So when I saw this number, I wasn't like, oh, we've done a terrible model and we're losing all of this money. I don't think so. I can imagine any school saying that they would pay this amount in a year for our titles.
And I think what that really states is there are different models for different size publishers. And on the other hand, there are many more university presses about the size of Duke whose books are widely bought and for whom I think the model would be attractive. But it always comes down to this element of calculated and bounded risk and how publishers and libraries are responding to a very different kind of world, a world in terms of the type of content, the amount of money, and also user behavior and the willingness of libraries to try and change user behavior. Because user behavior can be changed, but you have to be willing to invest. So earlier I stated the largest library in terms of print volumes in North Carolina is the Storage Library. Well, we can deliver books to faculty on the UNC campus for from the main library just as quickly as it takes to get from the off-site storage facility, 2 working days. So we have obliterated geography. And by obliterating geography and having all these ebooks, we have also changed user behavior, because the the building on campus that has the highest book document delivery is the building right across from the library, separated by a driveway, that houses history, political science, and sociology. It isn't worth them crossing the driveway to come and find a book, check it out, and take it to their office. Just like we have gotten to the point where, with all of these conversions of core publishers from print to electronic as the default, but continuing to get the most obvious books, beginning with all UNC campus faculty publications, we have gotten to the point where we get very few requests to duplicate an ebook with print. In fact, the request, we're now getting slightly more requests to duplicate a print book with E, mainly from graduate students who want accessibility. They're always so sweet and nice. I know you have this print book, but I'm going to be in Thailand for the next 6 months. Would you buy an added copy as an ebook? And we say yes to both. And by saying yes to duplication when between formats, when that level of duplication is so low, you change user behavior. They have, even in the most traditional humanities area, they have the security blanket. And of course, in a world where all books are born digitally, no books, at least from the US, UK, and most West European countries, really are ever going to go out of print.
So I'll also mention here, I know when we added this that Luke made this point, so I'll just echo it for him. And I would say that UF agrees with this point, that we would not envision doing a DDA with a core publisher such as this. But it is an interesting thought experiment. It is an interesting thing to consider. And we would look at, what if we did this as an EBA? And so list for this would have been well over 261,000. And so if we, with our existing EBA deposits, as they usually average around 10%, we would have expended 26,000, would have purchased 236 titles. So this is another look at how this model both works for us and works for Duke. And I'll let Kim make the point here, and then maybe also kind of discuss how Duke is considering moving forward with EBA.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And these numbers, again, are a little shocking just in terms of, okay, 261,000. Okay, that's not going to happen. But
to be clear, that number was gathered from the Gobi database of EBL pricing. So we didn't go to Duke and ask for list. We tried to do it as if it was running through an aggregator or something.
yeah. But then I think the thing that I actually notice more is the purchased titles. So then, our list of books were about, like I said, 2,500. So you would purchase these 200 some titles, but you wouldn't have access to everything else.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so a part of like what I said is we're switching platforms. We're launching this month, and part of the reason is we really do want to start doing more active product development. The reason we want to do that is because we want to offer options for everyone. So, starting to talk about what evidence base might look like for us. I mean, we're in really early conversations, so we actually want to hear from folks what they're looking for. But like I was saying is, if there's a model that we can come up with that maybe some of the smaller schools who don't need quite everything from us, but they want to get some things, we want to be able to offer that option. Right now, on the platform, on the Highwire platform where we're hosting our ebooks, we're only selling collections. We're not offering a la carte. We're not offering single title sales. We would like to be able to do that and then package those single titles into different collections, whether it be by subject. Maybe we include journals too. Maybe we do something that's evidence-based. So I had somebody that actually came up and said, well, I like your model and I don't mind the cost, but instead of the 100 titles that are in your front list, I want to pick the 100 titles. It's like, well, that's fair. So there goes a thought about an evidence-based model and what it might look like for us. So right, we're in the very early stages, but basically what we want to get to is that depending on what you need, what your budget is at your library, and what your programs are, we have some kind of option that's going to be appealing to you and affordable to you.
Yeah, please.
I'm glad she brought this up because I actually wanted to ask about that. I actually formerly worked at UF with Trey and Jason from a big library standpoint, and now I'm working at a smaller library. But I think across the board, I'm noticing the trend in both places. What we're seeing increasingly is selectors or subject librarians that are collecting in multiple subject areas now. Maybe somebody retires or we don't have the money to hire another librarian. So more and more I'm seeing these people who are 3 subject areas, 4 subject areas, and they may add something new and they're struggling to, cover all of those subject areas, or how do I even start in this brand new one that I got? And I can see where the smaller collections, as you just mentioned, might be very good supplementary option to people who are maybe struggling to get some of these packages. And I was wondering, I have not seen much of the model. I just started more in an acquisitions librarian role. But what would be some of the costs for some of the smaller packages, like the Latin American you mentioned, or the religious? I mean, the $7,000 very affordable for the entire collection. But again, I'm not sure whether the library would be interested in the whole collection. But certainly the smaller subject packages.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, off the top of my head, let's see. So for the regular collection, if we're just talking about the front list with term access to backlist for everything, if we were talking about a community college, it's about $1,500 a year. For a subject collection, Latin American Studies, Gender Studies are our biggest collections, about 575 titles each. I'm going to say it's definitely below 10,000. It's probably closer to 5,000, and that's for a purchase. So that's offering those options. But then even thinking about what you were saying and how it might relate to evidence-based, because we're so interdisciplinary, I think a lot of times some people are like, yes, we want the gender studies package. We have a gender studies program. This fits in wonderfully. But a lot of times folks maybe are not, if they had had some usage and had the content all open to them, I actually think that they would be surprised about what gets used. Because we're so interdisciplinary, we can slot things into different subject categories, but oftentimes the books are covering many areas. So while you may say, okay, we want this specific slice of content in this subject area, it could be that with evidence-based, folks give things a try and are surprised. We find that with our journals collection, where if people get the full journals collection, they would say, I never would have bought those 10 titles from you, but they're actually the highest used titles. So we would see the same thing, expect the same thing with the ebooks as well.
Do we have any comments or questions from the audience about PDA or EBA for this or another publisher's collections, or any comments? Okay. We have a few extra minutes, so we'll stretch. Do we have any comments or questions about ebook models in general? What you would like to see, what you don't like, what, if you're a publisher, what you're struggling with? Yeah.
So I'm glad to see there's actually a couple different university presses here. So because this is something that I've been thinking about. I mean, we're talking about perpetual access now, and that seems like we don't really have to deal with it in the now. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about providing perpetual access, like in the 5, 10, 50, like the technology infrastructure is presumably going to change. So just if you guys have thoughts about like what are your presses thinking about when you think about perpetual access and providing that for your purchasers?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Well, I think that what we think about is if we've sold somebody something and we have promised them perpetual access, we have to figure out how to honor that. But it's right that with changing technologies, there are additional costs to us. And so I think that's something that we are going to just have to watch and think about. We definitely are going to honor our site licenses, and if we've offered perpetual access, then we're going to find a way to provide it. We do have backups where we try to be in all of the archiving solutions and Portico and clocks and locks, just so that there's a safety net just in case. But I think it's something that we think about, but as we're upgrading, we're trying to keep up our technologies, and this is part of why we're changing platforms, so that we're keeping up with technology in a way that's affordable to us and sustainable, rather than having to make this leap, where then all of a sudden we can't afford to make the leap and we can't honor our perpetual access promises. So if we can keep up with technology, I hope that's gonna bring us where we need to be. But thinking 50 years from now, it is hard to think about. And you're right that some libraries will say, I don't care about perpetual access, meaning I don't think you can promise it. We have definitely had folks say that, and so they'll go for the lease, or they're not worried. But then there are other folks that really do say, especially, like I said, internationally or large schools, where they'll say, we really want to buy, and I think that part of it is perpetual access is important to them in their collection development policy, but also it could be that their budgets are so volatile that they really want to have made that purchase, and to them that gives them more stability in their collection.
So I was actually speaking with Liz Seiler last night, who was part of the Charlotte initiative, and she was talking about, I would do a bad job of explaining what the Charlotte initiative is if you don't already know, so I won't even go there. Maybe someone else could. But she was talking about how important she personally thought it was to try to get actual usable digital copies of whatever you're buying in perpetual access. And as from the library perspective, we often struggle, okay, well, if we get a file, what the heck do you do with it if it's even in a usable format? So, and I was just curious from the publisher side, how do you guys feel about it? I would love to get the files, but I'm not sure what to do with them. How do you feel about giving files away? Yeah.
Because if we get a file, say today, a PDF copy, in 30 years, is that going to be, that's not really guaranteeing perpetual access.
Exactly. So
then we're committing to migrating that,
right. So the comment was, if we get a usable file today, the format in 30 years or maybe even 5 years will be obsolete potentially, and then we would have to upgrade it somehow and maintain the perpetual access ourselves. So I'm happy relying on the publishers maintaining that perpetual access. Mm-hmm. Do you have anyone have any comments?
The bottom line is no one knows what is going to happen. When we talk about perpetual access, we are talking about a 30, maybe 50-year timeline, and those libraries that feel they need to have physical copies, it's not simply what are they going to do with it, but as Trey said, how are you going to migrate it? And so I think the thing is, we'll just have numerous backups. We will have the subscription services such as Portico. We will have publishers. We will assume that this content has some value, and therefore, even if a commercial publisher bankrupts, someone will buy this. Perhaps there'll be a consortium of libraries. I don't really know. But, it's kind of one of those things that it's not worth speculating about for all practical purposes. That's my read on it.
Well, I guess I kind of disagree with that, because we are intentionally purchasing with perpetual access. And I don't know that we all sort of, I don't know that there's a common definition, a baseline of what do we mean by perpetual access. You buy, I guess you could probably make the same argument for a book, but it feels different, I think. You buy the book, you have the object, you put it on the shelf, you feel confident, you go back in a year, that you can touch that book. Yes, it may disappear, walk off the shelf, get destroyed, whatever. But it feels, the whole ephemeral nature of the E, it just feels very different. But, I mean, at least from my institution, that perpetual part is very important. So, but it's kind of vaporware. I mean, it's kind of like, it's a word on paper that allows us to make this agreement, but enforcing that agreement,
And that's what the Charlotte Initiative found out. There are so many different understandings that it is not something real, tangible that we all agree upon. And I don't see in my lifetime us really coming to any kind of agreement on this evolving technology.
and hopefully we won't even have to deal with it.
Well, as Kane said, in the long term, we're all dead. So it's not going to be our problem to worry what's going to happen 30 to 50 years from now.
I mean, you almost need a failure to test the perpetual access, and I don't think any of us want to go there. So, so I have, since we're stretching, I have one other question for the audience. And so right now, pretty much PDF is the standard, but I know there's a push to move to EPUB as a format for ebooks. It has a lot of features that are good for ADA accessibility and stuff. And so what are the challenges the industry is facing to that for that migration, from whoever's perspective would like to comment? Nobody.
I mean, I can comment. I think for us, we're talking about it. We have some of our books in EPUB now. But it's cost. I mean, every time we're digitizing and we're doing, something in a different format and we're upgrading, there's gonna be cost to us. So I think we always try to hang back and wait and see in terms of what is a format, or even if it's a model, or just a way of doing things. We're not the kind of organization that can just experiment with everything that's out there. We have to really hone in on if we need to do an upgrade to a platform, or if we need to offer different formats for our content. We think pretty carefully about it, because then there's a lot of cost to get us there. So, and that even goes with your perpetual access comment, which is, I think we're always willing to stretch and go to the next thing, but we're going to be pretty careful, because we don't want to do it 5 times. We don't have the money to do that. So we have to really see where is the industry going, and if this is the format that really is preferred, and we're getting a lot of feedback from our customers, this is what you need to do, then we're going to make a move. But we're not going to be an early adopter necessarily, because then it could be in 5 years that it goes to something completely different. We've spent all this money, and then we have to increase prices to cover that, and we don't want to do that.
And what I think, on the basis of conversation with the university lawyers and scholarly communication officers who hold JDs, what is going to change is when there is a successful disability lawsuit that is not settled out of court, but results in a judicial decision. And that is going to push all the providers of e-resources, libraries and publishers, to a new technological level.
Do we have any other questions?
If you're asking about EPUB, again, aggregated perspective, we're seeing more and more publishers produce both
Yeah.
PDF and EPUB.
Right.
Where there is some trouble with what they're producing as EPUB 2, EPUB 3,
Mm.
but it's much more prevalent now than it was.
So from the aggregator perspective, most publishers many publishers are putting out both formats. The issue is which version of EPUB they're putting out. Okay. Right, okay. Any other questions or comments about anything? We got like 2 minutes, so.
One quick thing. You talked earlier about going through an aggregator, dealing directly with the publisher. Again, if you're handling many hats and doing many things, and that's just one more person, group, whoever to deal with, I'm wondering, you talked about usage and all, but how is that being provided to you? Or are you asking them for it on a regular basis? I know you guys, that was another thing, you kind of like, we don't, but maybe for someone who's starting a program or some of these smaller programs or an EBA or DDA, what is the process of getting that usage from you? Is it somewhere I get to the platform and get it? Do I call you up? Do you send it to me twice a year? And then how far down usage can we go by chapter? Hold, download, whatever.
So from my librarian perspective, at least on the Highwire platform, we'll see so maybe Kim can tell us about Silverchair. I go to the admin site and I log in and I download a counter report when I choose. And I'm sure you can schedule things, maybe that's a feature. And I bet Kim's team would be happy to send it to you as well, I'm guessing.
Of course. Yeah, we're happy to send it, but we would love for you to also go and download it whenever you want to. So, yeah, I mean, and that's part of when we're picking platform, I mean, we have to think about what we want to offer, libraries. And I think, yes, if you asked me, I would pull you a usage report. But if everybody asked me, me and Amber, my colleague in customer relations, we might fall over. So I think, on the new platform, yes, it's going to be that you can download it yourself. You can set up a sushi feed and all of that. So we see that as pretty standard. And I think, when we were looking for, doing RFP for different platforms, that was something that this is a requirement because we would not have the resources if we had to send reports out to everybody. We just wouldn't be able to do it. And we feel like that's just a part of the package now. It's like that's a requirement. It's not a thing. You're like, I'm buying this content. I need to be able to see how it's being used.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.